The program that's evolved from a number of conversations that CPD has had with our partners in the INC, and I'll let Margie talk in just a minute. We've also heard just from individual folks in the professional field, from individual residents who desire to have an opportunity to learn more about the nuts and bolts of planning outside of the specifics of a specific individual planning case or a rezoning case or a planning effort. So we're thrilled that you're here this evening. The other thing that's pretty unique about this program is this is, of the Citizens Planning Academy that we're aware of throughout the nation, this is the first that I'm aware of that is a joint cooperative effort between a public agency, between the Office of Community Planning and Development in this instance, and INC. So INC is Margie is the co-chair of the Zoning and Planning Committee for INC, and I'll let her say just a few things about INC, introduce some VIPs that we have in the audience this evening, and then we'll get started with our introductions and icebreakers.
Hello everyone and welcome. We're so glad to see everyone. As Evelyn says, this is our first academy, and we're going to work through this, and I think it's going to be very exciting. INC is a partner with Community Planning and Development. Early this year, we sponsored this Citizens Academy. A little bit about INC. The INC was organized in 1975, and the purpose was to organize to help the registered neighborhood organizations interact with registered neighborhood organizations, affect the quality of life in your neighborhoods. And it's extremely important to know how to be an advocate and what to do. Let's see here. As co-chair of the INC Zoning and Planning Committee, I'm going to invite you to the monthly meetings we have. We meet on the fourth Saturday of each month. Our meetings are at 1201 William Street on the 19th floor. You do not have to be a member of INC to attend. Anyone is welcome. I'd like to just end with one of the things that I thought was important. We hope that the Academy answers the following questions for all of you. How do I fit into all of this? This is what you do. This is how you do it. Here are the tools to help you be an advocate for your neighborhood. And if you get that out of it, we've succeeded. And with that, I'd like to introduce Larry Ambrose. Larry is the president of INC. And Larry, we're so glad to see you tonight. Wave to everybody.
Thank you all for coming. Happy to be part of this. Thank you.
All right, so the next item on our agenda is just a quick introductions and icebreaker, and this means you all. So what I have, because we're planners, we can't help go to a meeting without having a map. If you have a map up here. And what I'd like to do is, on a volunteer basis, table by table, I'd like to have each one of you come up to the front. If we do this right, we'll be done in half an hour, so nobody gets more than a minute. I'd like you to take a little dot, put a dot on the map, show us where you come from in Denver, and tell us one amazing thing about your neighborhood. You're going to be together for the next 3 weeks, so.
Where's the dot? Does that have to be yellow? Okay. The statistical neighborhood is called the East Colfax neighborhood. Essentially, it is everything between Quebec and Yosemite and Lowry and Stapleton. So ripe for some changes and development because of the other development in the area. My name is Tom Feasing. I'm the president of the Neighborhood Association. We've been around since 1973. One of the oldest RNOs in the city. And the most interesting thing about our neighborhood is just all the history itself. There's just an incredible history. You can check out our website and find out more about that history.
That's Tom, right?
Tom.
Tom. Okay, there's a quiz at the end of all of this. Carrie, I'm looking at you. Do you want to come up and introduce yourself?
Sure. So it's not really voluntary. It really isn't. Many things in life. Here's your dot. Okay. Enjoy. So my name is Carrie O'Shea, and I'm president of the Historic Montclair Community Association.
which is Montclair. So that is, here we are. Our boundaries are Colfax to 6th Avenue and Holly to Quebec. So we're adjacent to Tom's neighborhood, East Colfax, East Montclair. And we also overlap with the Mayfair neighborhood. Kind of an odd thing, and no one can explain how and why that is, but between Monaco and Holly, we share those streets with the Mayfair neighborhood. So, well, okay, that's easy. Our RNO incorporated in 1907 because Montclair was originally its own little town out on the prairie, founded by Baron Walter von Richthofen. So as a little oasis from the nasty city of Denver. And so the amazing thing that he gave our neighborhood, besides our beautiful parks and parkways with big trees and such, is his home, the Richthofen Castle on 12th and Olive. And there's a gatehouse with it too. And so we're really excited because for years it has been in disrepair. And it is a National Historic Landmark, and thankfully this wonderful couple bought it a couple years ago, and they're putting tons of blood and sweat into it and fixing it up and making it beautiful again. So
That's great. Yeah.
So they won't mind if we show up to tour the house while they're working on it, or?
No, not at all.
Great, I'm gonna give you that, and then we've got Allison on back here.
Hi, I'm Allison. I like to finance, which means I have to be able to read a map. I am just around the corner in Whittier. One of the things that is really great about our neighborhood and our neighborhood organization is that we're really trying to create a space to tackle some of the tough issues around race, socioeconomic status, gentrification, some of those really important things that are happening in our community.
I do have
Yeah.
I'm from Highland. My name's Kirk. And I'm not on the board there or anything. I just go to some of the PCD committee meetings. And I'm interested in the neighborhood because I've lived there for 13 years. I've owned property for 18 almost. And Highland is bordered on the north, it's 38. On the south is Spear Boulevard. And then on the west is Federal. And pretty much I-25 on the east. It's growing a lot. It's changed a lot in the several years that I've been there. It's been amazing. There's several amazing things about Highland. I think one of the coolest is that it is the oldest neighborhood in Denver. That's it.
Okay, I'm really bad at maps. So, anyway, my name is Biddy LeBrow. I'm from the East Wash Park neighborhood. I've been involved with,
That's good. For someone who's
okay.
not giving-
So, at any rate, let's see, I have been in Denver since 2000 and have been involved with the Neighborhood Association since 2001. I've seen a lot of changes in our neighborhood, but I think one of the greatest things about our neighborhood, and I think one of the greatest things about our city, is the people, the energy, the vitality, and the passion about homes and how we want to see our cities grow forward.
Great. All right, which table is volunteering next?
Come on, Rose. Come on, Rose.
And yet you've been called out. There you go. There's your
Sorry.
card.
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Rose, and I'm on the board of Sunnyside neighborhood, but I actually live in Chappie, so I'm going to put my dot there. And something interesting about Chappie, pretty quiet neighborhood. The phenomenon of Highlands has not quite reached us yet. I bought my house in 1996 for $69,000, a HUD renovated house, and the houses next door to me are going for $250,000.
My name is Paul Marcus. I live in Park Hill. Yes, we are North Parkland. I don't sit on any boards. I think the greatest thing about our neighborhood is the diversity that we currently have and the opportunities that we have to embrace the change that's overtaking Denver right now.
I think we have one more person at your table.
Hi, my name's Lamone Knowles, and I'm a Denver resident, second generation, and I'm a resident of Park Hill.
I'm Rosemary Stoffel, and I live in University Park. And I've been involved in my neighborhood for a very long time. I was involved in putting together the small area plan for our neighborhood, which was passed by City Council in 2008. And I was a zoning code update committee co-chairman in 2010. And I've followed what's happened in our neighborhood since that time. I'm also very involved in historic preservation.
Great, thank you.
So what I think you're starting to see here, and while I talk, which table's next? Raise your hand.
Right here.
Oh, all right. I like that. I think what you're starting to see
Do that, don't put your hat on, I'll be talking over.
is that we've got some good geographic diversity. We had over 96, I think it was 96 applicants for 30 positions. So we were working really hard to find the diversity geographically, demographically, and also in terms of level of experience, and in terms of how you've interacted or interacted is a good enough word, with the planning process in the past, because we don't want all newbies, we don't want all veterans, we want a good mix. And so we're starting to see that here just with the map. I'm going to give the mic here to Walter.
Hi, my name is Walter Huff, and I live in the area that's called Southmore Park, which is Hamden and Monaco. Monaco would be the west boundary, Hamden would be the north boundary, Tamarack would be the east boundary, and the south boundary would be Quincy. Our community, we get really involved with Southmore Elementary, TJ High School, and Hamilton Middle School. So we're real active out there. We're starting to see, well, not starting to see, but there's a lot of TOD and development right there, I-25 in Hamden, I-25 in Yale.
Great.
Thanks for volunteering this part of the room. Lloyd, there's your job.
Unlike Mr. Huff, I'm in 80203. Can anybody guess what zip code that is? Capitolville.
Yeah.
Should be easy to find.
Yeah.
Right here. So I am a legal administrator. I'm also the executive director for the Colorado Tenants Association, which is CODA. The law firm that I work for, we are a landlord tenant dispute resolution and fair housing law firm. In District 10, our city council representative is Wayne New. Again, that's 80203. What's unique about Capitol Hill is we're probably the most diverse neighborhood and the most dense in the entire city of Denver. We have single mothers, senior citizens, veterans. We have members of the GLBTQ community, the straight community, the brown community, the black community. We have several constituents that have substance abuse problems. We're very diverse in our vices. We have cannabis, we have alcohol, we have crack. Exactly. So this is a neighborhood that you should come and enjoy. It's changing. It's very diverse, and I'm proud to be a resident here. Thank you.
Next from this, we've got JC walking up to the front of the room. I haven't heard any of favorite restaurants, so always feel free to provide recommendations.
Piccolos.
Piccolo?
Yes.
We got 6, Colfax, Jewel.
My name is J.C. Homestead. I'm with the Overland Group, and I noticed 2 other neighbors here. We have an active neighborhood, and they're very interested in seeing what's happening and being part of it. I'll throw a plug in here. The reason this is unique is there's a 92-year-old business there called EMW Furniture. It's where my grandparents started it. And so we're proud to be here to see what's happening in the city.
Great.
Yeah, sure.
My name is Maggie Mueller, and I live in Five Points. We moved here in February from Stapleton. We're so excited to be in Five Points. What is amazing about this neighborhood is the diversity, and I really hope with all the changes that we can figure out some way, maybe in the first time of the history of the United States, to maintain diversity even as it changes. So I'm just fascinated in how that can happen. I love coffee at the Point, but I'll give a shout out to Dunbar's because my son's a dishwasher there. And the food is awesome. Just walked in around 28. I guess that's it.
Great.
My name is Joe Coomer. I'm a proud resident of Jefferson Park, just north of the Broncos Stadium. We have a beautiful park, booming businesses, but along with a lot of other people, I'm hearing is it's changing and we're struggling to keep the diversity in our neighborhood, affordable housing, things like that. Restaurants, Sarto's, a fine Italian restaurant, and Sassafras, Southern country style cooking.
My name is James Sample. I'm the INC delegate for the Overland Park neighborhood, which is Mississippi on the north, Yale on the south, Broadway on the east, and the river on the west. And a great new restaurant just opened in our neighborhood called the Taste of Thai. But it's on Broadway. It's just south of Evans on Broadway, on the northwest, east side of Broadway. Thank you.
Great. Rachel. I am from West Highland neighborhood, and you came up here from Highland. There we are. We are indeed west of Highland, but it's 29th Avenue to 38th Avenue and Federal Boulevard to Sheridan Boulevard. And I'm on the West Highland Neighborhood Association, or a member, not the treasurer, president, or anything. But I do serve on the zoning and preservation committees. And I guess there are many restaurants. I guess I'm thinking of one on 38th called Brazen is pretty good. They're a little pricey. And I like El Camino on 32nd, which is a Mexican restaurant. One interesting thing, most people would think of 32nd Avenue or Highland Park, but it's a very large area, covers a lot of ground, and what I find interesting is that it's a tapestry of many little neighborhoods and districts within that entire area, and it's to the south is Sloan's Lake, and to the north is the Berkeley Regis neighborhood. Jessica.
Hi there, my name is Jessie Fisher. I moved to the Barnum neighborhood about 3 to 4 months ago after they told us they were raising our rent in West Wash Park by over 25%. So that's been fun. It's actually been really a blessing. I absolutely love Barnum. There's so much that's great about it. I think the diversity is for sure one. But because a lot of you took that already, I'll also mention that our neighborhood was selected as one of Denver's sustainable neighborhoods to participate in a new program through the Department of Environmental Health, which has been really exciting. And in terms of restaurants, there's one right on Federal called Puerto Vallarta that has amazing Mexican food.
Alright, I'm Scott Mobley. We're down in Harvey Park South, down in the corner. I like a lot of things about the neighborhood. I'm new to the neighborhood. I'm looking forward to getting more involved in figuring out how to do that here. There's a lot to get to on Federal, but it's not really Harvey Park South food. So I'll say the best thing about it is Loretta Heights. It's the highest point in Denver. As you can see, incredible view of the mountains, see downtown, all the way down here. And nobody knows about it, so it's my favorite thing.
president of the University Hills Neighborhood Association. We're right down here. We don't have any good restaurants. We have some decent Mediterranean restaurants on Colorado, but we usually come and visit you. We cook at home a lot, so if you want a good meal, just kind of follow the barbecue scent. We're a sleepy little neighborhood, 6,000 folks. The thing that's amazing about our neighborhood is it's where Highline Canal enters Denver. And we have one of the nicest little parks that you've probably never been to. If you drive down Colorado, it looks about a half block wide, but it's actually this big 12-block long park, Eisenhower Park, where the rec center is. Nice, wonderful place. Until recently, every home in the neighborhood was built between 1949 and 1951. Now we're seeing, of course, a lot of scrapes in our neighborhood. So it's not necessarily controversial. I think we're glad to see the development, but it is definitely changing our dynamic from a lot of elderly to a lot of new young families. Okay.
Hi, I'm Michelle Price-Hirsch. I live in the Berkeley Regis neighborhood, which is just in the far northwest quadrant of Denver, as far as you can go in Denver and then not be in Arvada. And it's up here. And like the last gentleman said, our situation is very, very similar, even though we're completely different. We're not sleepy or anything. It's a lot of change in our neighborhood. I don't serve on any boards, but I do hope to one day be able to relieve some of the people who do. And I think I'm allergic to microphones, and you wouldn't hardly the restaurants. If you missed out on the Great American Beer Fest or want more of it, then come to our neighborhood for Hops and Pie. It's the best tap room in the city, in my opinion, and many others. And if you like pizza, even gluten-free pizza, it's amazing.
Howard is my name. I live in Sunnyside, where I moved in 1993. It's quite an exciting neighborhood in those days, not in the best way. Sunnyside was settled by poor Italian immigrants beginning in the 1890s. It's really a neighborhood on the cutting edge at the moment. We have new rail transit coming, which is going to transform, we think, the east end of the neighborhood. And the rest of the neighborhood, of course, is subject to other development pressures. We have a lot which is worth preserving. We have a lot of wonderful people. We have a certain amount that should just be raised. And it probably will be. Anyway, who's next?
Hi, I'm Becca Deershaw. I live in City Park West. And I work with historic Denver, so preservation is kind of my bent. But the best thing about City Park West is just, I can walk anywhere, I can see anything. I can go to 17th, where there's too many restaurants to even name, so just put 17th Street on there. I just love my neighborhood and seeing all the historic buildings.
Hi, my name is Drew Dutcher. I'm an architect and planner. We work mostly in the city of Denver on sort of urban sites. About 8 years ago, I bought a house in the neighborhood probably nobody's heard of, called Elyria. And it's actually been, some people merged with Swansea. But I quickly found out after moving in, there's a lot going on here. And this is a very ethnic neighborhood, majority Latino. I'm presently trying to learn Spanish. In a low-income neighborhood, but just some of the issues that we are facing is the expansion of I-70. It's now going to be the trench, I guess, of the current plan. I've been pretty involved in the master plan of the National Western Center. We have a new RTD's North Commuter Train will have a new stop opening in the Elyria neighborhood in 2018, where part of the National Western development is to really clean up the river. And we recently just got our neighborhood plan passed by City Council in January. So there's a lot going on.
Arnold from University Hills North. So we've got the University Hills area kind of divided into two sections, and I see somebody else is already here from University Hills. There we are, Andy. We've got 2 light rail stations in our neighborhood. We've got maybe 600 houses. We're a small area, but we have tons of development going on. And so that's why we're here. We want to get a handle on it. And I see they've got a neighborhood plan. We don't. We'd like one. We'd like to have some input into the development in our neighborhood.
Great. I'm Katie. I live in the Globeville neighborhood. And my favorite place in Globeville is Northside Park. If you haven't been there or don't know where it is, you should definitely check it out. My favorite restaurant is the Panderia Emmanuel. It's the worst cup of coffee, but the best pastries that you'll have in Denver. And I'm not much of a coffee drinker, so that's fine. And Lake Drew, we're really close to Elyria, and so there's lots of things going on with I-70 redevelopment, new light rail stations. The National Western Center, Northeast Denver, is a cool part to be in right now.
And I live in Hale. I live right next to the University Hospital, which is being torn apart piece by piece. And interesting story is just a couple weeks ago, woke up and got to watch a pretty large, about 10-story building demolished into the ground. So hopefully you see what we have.
Great. I'm Chris Petty, and I live in Hilltop. And we start at Colorado Boulevard, go up to about 6, down to Alameda, and then Holly, and sometimes over to Monaco, and kind of zigzag around over there. And Hilltop's kind of an interesting area. It's a wonderful walkable area, bikeable area, nice wide streets, nice trees, although some of the trees got kind of hit by our frost and are suffering. But Cranmer Park is a really, really cool park. That's between 1st and 3rd, and there's a big sundial there, and we have a big fundraising going on to try and get that all fixed up and so forth. But it's a cool area. Not a whole lot of diversity other than diversity of age. There's lots of families moving in. There's older folks like me. I'm retired now, and I'm really passionate about walking and the health of our communities, and I've gotten involved with an organization called Walk to Connect. So I've walked in all sorts of neighborhoods around Denver, Stapleton and Capitol Hill and Park Hill, and to me, we need to make our communities walkable, because the Surgeon General says that our key to extended life is happiness, and we get to happiness by having gratitude, exercise, meditation, social connectivity, and kindness.
Good recipe. I think we've got our last.
This is my second time around in Park Hill. I've lived in the Five Points, Whittier, Cole, Clayton. I'm a veteran of Denver, 49 years, September 9th. There's no better place, I think, in the U.S. than Denver. We've got a lot of problems. We've got sewage problems in Park Hill. We almost flooded out when we had some of the heavy rains. We can improve. I think that we're doing a wonderful job bringing citizens together to talk about diversifying the plan. So I want to be a part of that.
Perfect. Thanks, Bob.
Did I miss anybody who's a participant in the Citizens Planning Academy who wants to share, introduce? Anybody want to go around again? More? Okay, good. So we are doing a great job of this at keeping on schedule. I've managed to misplace my notes somewhere in the room now, but the next thing on your agenda is an overview of the Citizens Planning Academy, sort of why we're all here, why we hope you're here. Oh, God bless you. So much easier than an iPhone. Okay, so why you're here, what the Citizens Planning Academy is and what it isn't. And communities all across the country in the world, in many areas of the world, help to put together processes to help guide development, growth, and change in their communities. Why plan? Because growth happens. You know, unless we start this zero population growth thing in earnest and everybody commits to clamp down now, populations are growing. And, you know, we're seeing that here in Denver, not just sort of the population that's naturally growing within our confines, but people really being attracted to the amazing things. Many of you touched on this evening in terms of, you know, what we love about your neighborhood that's attractive to folks coming from outside of the Denver area as well. So we're growing, growth is happening. This is not a forum to debate whether or not growth is good or bad. If we all start from the place that we accept that growth and change is happening, and what do we do about it, that's sort of where the planning conversation starts. Planning can help to ensure that the growth that happens in a way that's consistent with the unique character of a community. We recognize that there's not a one-size-fits-all. I'll produce a little over this side of the room. There's a lot of different forces at play. So there are things like economic realities, economic drivers. There's population and demographic demands. Different populations, different age groups, different demographics have different desires. There's also culture and history. I want to recognize that as a force that's at play in helping to shape a community. There's natural resources, there's infrastructure questions, there's a whole host of factors that help to shape how a community grows and develops. And I expect to hear from you all in the conversations that start this evening and continue into the next two sessions, your thoughts on on balancing those different forces at play, other forces that we haven't identified yet. So I've been with community planning and development in this role for the last year and a half or so. And over the course of the last year and a half, I spent a lot of time making this gesture. Right? It's like a little bit like a stewardess. So we talk about the planning process. It starts big picture. It's really general, it's broad. Then as we move through the process, we start looking at more regulatory tools. So we've done the planning process, we've identified sort of the vision of a community, and then we work in trying to figure out the regulatory tools to help implement the vision that's identified through that planning process. So that's a little bit more specific. And then we start looking at permitting and review, development review, and sort of where the rubber hits the road, where developers are coming in and proposing developments. We are reviewing those developments against the regulatory tools that we developed to be informed by the vision that we did at the top of this inverted pyramid. So we've got the visioning, the regulations, the permitting, and enforcement, and then we sort of start the whole thing over again. It's an ongoing process, and through the course of that sort of funneling process, there are different opportunities for public involvement. And that's a real big goal, I think a shared goal of both INC and CPD, is to really help to define where you fit in that funnel, where your opportunities are to engage in the process, because they're different depending on where we are in the process. So this first year CPA, as I mentioned, this is your our guinea pigs. We're starting small. These are baby steps. We've only got 3 sessions. We fully expect that this would likely evolve over time. We may expand this to take on other topics, legal issues and planning, site development review, and how that works, those types of things. But this first year, we're really just focusing on that visioning part, that planning. So we're going to spend this evening talking, the rest of this evening after I stop yammering. We'll talk about citywide planning. Next week, for the next session, we'll talk about neighborhood or small area planning. And then the final week, we'll wrap up with a session on zoning, which is sort of the regulatory teeth to planning. So we're really just focusing on visioning and planning and regulation, and moving forward, we'll likely grow and expand the curriculum. As we talk about these different topics, we're going to be real specific in trying to identify the opportunities for public involvement. But because of the limited scope of the academy, there are things that will come up in this class that won't fall within our agenda, within our scope, that we won't be addressing. I don't want to ignore those. What we've thought about doing, and tell us what you think about this, as Margie will be taking notes as we have these conversations, as we get into the more dialogue part of the evenings. If questions come up that fall outside of the scope of this particular session, we'll take note of it. It may not be something that we can answer that evening, but we'll note it and we'll follow back up with you on that. So with that, my final note is at the end of this evening, I'll be passing out a survey, a feedback survey. It's just got 3 questions. It's really easy to answer. And we really are honestly, sincerely looking for feedback from you all. What works well, what doesn't work well, what you found most valuable, what we could probably do without moving forward. So keep that in mind as we move forward. We really are excited that you're here. You're an elite select few. We've got a great diversity geographically, just looking around the room in terms of the age and the experiences that you described. We're thrilled that you're here. And with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers for the presentation portion of the evening. We've got Sarah Showalter. And is there a specific order you all are going in? Together? Okay. So Sarah Showalter is our Citywide Planning Supervisor with Member CPD, and she's joined this evening with Laura Aldrete, who is the Principal Associate Planner with Matrix Design Group.
Evelyn said, really excited to be here tonight. I'm a Denver native and I'm a planner who's very passionate about planning in general and how it helps empower people to improve their neighborhoods. So it's really exciting for me to sit here and see all of you here and how committed you are and the diversity of neighborhoods you represent. So thank you for being here and all that you do make Denver a great place. So Laura and I are going to talk about citywide planning, which, like Evelyn was saying, is kind of that biggest, highest level, because not only is it setting a vision, so we're not getting into specific regulation yet, we're really setting vision and goals, but it's doing it at a citywide level. So at the next class, we'll talk about doing that at a neighborhood level, but tonight we're really going to focus on thinking about the city as a whole. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Laura, and maybe you can say a little bit about your background.
Hi, everyone. Do I have to use this? It's so easier because I'm pretty sure y'all can hear me. But my name is Laura Aldrete, and I am an urban planner by training. I am a Denver native and moved back into my mom's neighborhood of West Highlands about 18 years ago. And let's see, one of the things, when I started thinking about this, how to try to convey this idea of what urban planning is, probably the best way I thought about it is to tell you a little bit about how I came to urban planning, which is my first career, I was an archaeologist in Latin America and the United States. And what was important to me was to understand how trade happened across geographic regions, how people gathered in cultural ceremonial places, how that large cultural ceremonial place related to smaller outer settlements around, and how that was agricultural, and how there was a trade between agricultural and a lot of pottery elements. This is the late Classic Maya down in Honduras, where I spent my thesis and then part of my career for about 3-4 years down there, working back and forth in the United States. So it was great. You just blow through dirt and discover lots of mounds and burials. The problem was everybody was dead. Right, so you couldn't impact change. And at the end of the season, you write a monologue, and you put it in the National Library in Tegucigalpa, and nobody would ever read it, and nothing would ever change. So you come back the next season and do some more digging. And a friend of mine gave me an article on a project that Le Corbusier did in India, where he was doing a social housing project, and he designed the bathroom right next to the kitchen, without thinking about the culture of the people, and who those people were, and what it meant for them. And no one inhabited that affordable housing complex ever, right? So the idea that culture and who people are and how they identify and what matters to them culturally is such a part of the physical place that we live in. And so that just seemed like a perfect fit for me. I wanted to actually try to impact change and impact my community and make change in my community. So I changed careers and studied and went to school at UCLA. Came back here. My husband's also a Denver native, and I work both in the public and the private sector. I've worked on Stapleton. I was the project manager for the mayor's office, 2000, just when it was starting to come out of the ground. I have worked on St. Anthony's, so just disclosure for those of you who don't like St. Anthony's or like it. And I'm currently working on the Gates redevelopment project. I worked on Dahlia when I was the deputy director for the Urban Renewal Authority. So the way I thought I would talk about what citywide planning is to give you the approach of how I think about it. I also love to travel, And so this is a picture of ancient Athens, where I was a couple of years ago. And if you think about what you're looking at, there are some things that are very similar. There's roadways, there's a network, there's large arterials that move through the space. There's a small network of neighborhoods, right, and small network of streets. There are ceremonial centers, right? There are big governmental centers. There are market centers, and then there's theaters around the place, right? So there's arts, culture, government. In that time, religious was kind of all part of the government as well. And market commerce was happening here, right? And then you have this, similarly, you've got this neighborhoods around it. Next slide, please. So can we dim the lights just for these photos? Can't see them very well. Here's the Acropolis, but the other thing that I love to do, and so as, even though I'm a planner and I like to think about cities, the thing that really, how you build cities is you have to understand the infrastructure. And so I almost always am taking pictures of storm sewer and water systems, waste systems. So this is about, I mean, Athens really came about in the 11th century BC. This is probably about 400 BC. This is in the marketplace. Two different systems. This is actually a stormwater system. It's about a 4-foot, it's almost like a box culvert like you have here, like we have today. 4x4, and they just lay big stones over it, right? And this is part of a plaza. This is up on the Acropolis itself, and this is another stormwater system. And you can see where they had placed stones over that system. The next one I wanted to show of citywide planning is Rome. This is a famous map that was done in the 700s by a photographer by the name of Noli. It's a great website that you can go on. It's interactive. You can pull out the churches or the streets or the plazas, and it's a pretty cool map if you like to look at a map. But again, what's interesting about this is that Noli starts looking at public realms. And to him, and to what I think of public realm, is really our public streets. If you think about what we describe as public streets, we call it the public right-of-way. So I like to say, it is not about cars. It is about the people's place. And we need to start thinking about, as they did in 700 AD Rome, this is the people's place. And so interestingly, he also includes all the churches as public, the inside of the churches as public space. We wouldn't do that today, separation of church and state. But the point being is that public streets, the streets are the public and they're for the people. And in 700s, also the churches were for people as well and considered part of the public space. This is just an interesting side here. This is a close-up of the map, and this is a satellite image of the map, where you see the similar layout. But some people talked about density and Capitol Hill being the most dense, which I agree, and love Capitol Hill. And maybe you don't see it so well, you might see it better in your copies, but the density in Rome is just incredible. And they still have this vibrant, living, very diverse in terms of, I would say, age and economics. They're all Italians, though. But I love them, you know. But interesting, right? Like, so how does this city that is more, you know, I don't know. I think 700 BC is when it really started coming into its own. So you have to think 2,800 years of city living on top of itself, and it's a great vibrant place. And then the next slide, kind of a machination of different pictures. But what I thought was so impressive is this is 2,800 years of city, of people living. And you can see the different architecture and the different layers that have happened. And then on the top, you follow these stairs, you follow this wall up. And the whole current city is on top of this tell that has happened over 2,800 years. And so you think about how did they build the forum? This is ancient looking into the forum here, and organize their markets and their economy and how people live and who live where, and their ceremonial centers. And again, they just run. And then today, so that's, you know, turn of the century, probably this right here, close to the Coliseum. And today, they just run that ancient, historically preserved building into, this is probably 1700s, right? But it's current, it's living. And so thinking about how Denver, which is not quite 200 years old, is going to evolve and change and grow is really what I think citywide planning is about. So just a couple more on this side of the continent. I also have a master's degree in Latin American studies, as you might guess from my previous career. And one of the things I really focused on in graduate school was the Law of the Indies, which was written in the 1535 specifically, when Spain was coming over and conquering and building new cities in the New World. And they were very prescriptive about how you should build a city. And every city had a plaza. Every city had a church on one specific side, and every city had, and on the other side was the government buildings. They were thoughtful about the direction of the winds. They were thoughtful about how close they were to a body of water, to mountains, to fresh water. And it's a document. This is actually from the document. This is from Santa Fe. This is from San Antonio. This is a picture of San Antonio doing some work there now. But you can see it. You can walk these towns still and see that. And of course, throughout Latin America, you see patterns of the citywide planning that was happening in the 1500s. Summer I was in Peru, and they doesn't really show. It's pretty mystical up there. But and going back to my roots as an archaeologist, right? This is like early cool stuff, because here you've got a whole residential center happening on this top of this mountain. It's very sheer. You can see the sheerness of the mountains here. You have a plaza situation, right? So community gathering places. You have this more as the government and where priests did studying of the astronomy. And then next slide. I don't know if you can see it very well, but this is all on the hillside. You have your agriculture, right? So economic development. They have to live. They have to trade. They have to subsist. And so here you've got other slides, but this one. And then this again, because I always liked infrastructure. These are stormwater lines. Next slide. Stormwater lines. And this is me standing over something, so it's hard to see. But this is their fresh water, drinking water system that they have, and they would pool it, and then it drops down into other pools from that. You can see it's coming through here, dropping into here, and continuing on. So pretty incredible stuff. So it's important what we do and what you all do and how you participate in citywide planning is incredibly, incredibly important. People have been doing it for thousands of years. So just to bring it back to who we are today and what we're doing today, there are a couple citywide plans, comprehensive plans that are going on around the country. I did a little bit of research, and the interesting thing is everybody is asking the same question. We're expecting to have, right, Denver's question is, or Denver's piece is, there's going to be 100,000 people that move into the city of Denver in the next 10 years. That's 10,000 people a year. What are we going to do with it, right? Seattle, Raleigh, they're all asking the same questions. The only place that is not asking that question is the state of Indiana, who is losing population. In fact, I responded to a request for proposals. I didn't get it, but they were saying we are rated like at the bottom of every top 10 list, and they wanted to change that perspective, and all their small communities are losing population, and they're saying, what can we do to change this nasty perception that we're getting, and in fact, being proven by the fact that everyone is leaving the state of Indiana. So no digs against
They're not getting paid anyway.
They're not getting it back, right? There's only one place to go on after this. So anyways, we should be lucky. We're lucky in certain respects because there's other parts of the country that don't have this problem. So San Antonio, I mentioned earlier, I'm working on the multimodal transportation plan. They're asking us, they're saying, here's our street network system today, 2010, green means thumbs up, limited congestion. Here we are in 2040, and that means red means a lot of congestion, traffic. And so what are we going to do about it? And if you might know, Texas, they like cars and trucks in particular. So getting them to think about multimodal has been a really interesting challenge for us. One of the things I think that is very progressive, and I think Denver will be doing this also, is they're not just looking at multimodal. They've hired a consultant team to look at this. They have a consultant team, actually Meg, who's here, a really tremendous planning group, doing the comprehensive plan, and then they have a group doing the sustainability plan and trying to bring it all together. And what this is really about, which is what Denver was on the forefront about 10 years ago or in 2002, is about transportation and land use. and the connection between those two and how they impact each other and how you might enjoy a street to be on because of the land use and the way the street is designed helps control or impact vehicular behavior versus other streets like Colorado Boulevard that can be really challenging because it's a car sewer and cars just go. So that's one, San Antonio. Another one is Seattle is doing another one, and so here they've got the same, very similar, right? They've got residents coming in, they've got jobs coming in, great news, but they're limited in their space in terms of where and how they grow. And so they're asking the same question on this big region. What's interesting is that they start diving down into zoning and their comprehensive plan. So I think that is it for it. Oh, and the other thing is questions, because we're going to be talking at you for 40 minutes, or just make a comment. So don't feel like you have to just listen to us.
I have a quick question about Seattle. When you said they're looking at their zoning, are they looking to change a lot of their zoning, or are they looking to like, say this area is going to be more dense, so let's upgrade it to a higher density use, or?
So what they're doing is they're defining villages, which I think is interesting to describe neighborhoods as villages, because I often think that I live in a village and I try not to leave a 5-mile radius. And this one in particular, just this is an example, but they pulled it out of, they're building it around the transit station. And then they're looking at potential changes. So you can see there's stability, right, in residential, and here they're looking at some zoning changes up there as a part of it. That is kind of mixing policy, which is really what a comprehensive plan is, and zoning, which is really law and ordinance, which I see as two really different things, you know, guiding versus actual law.
In your planning and studying other cities' development, is there a push for walkability neighborhoods in conjunction with
Yes.
bicycle lanes?
Yes.
Because I know Governor
So
Hickenlooper just,
yeah.
approved this massive statewide bicycle.
So I would say absolutely it is a national trend, right? And really New York City has done a fabulous job, and if they can do it in New York City, any other city should be able to do it. I will quote the Director of Transportation who here, Chrissy Paganella, who says, you know, how many people here want a bikeable Denver, right? How many here want a walkable Denver? How many people actually drive the speed limit when you're driving in your car? Right, so it's a lot about behavior, and if you really want a bikeable Denver and a walkable Denver, it is about creating good sidewalks and safe places for bikes. It's also behavioral. We have to start changing how we are thinking. I mean, I cycle to work 3 times a day, but I can guarantee you I'm also speeding in yellow light. Maybe red, but yellow.
Yeah,
right? I mean, yeah, no, I know, and bikers do it too, right?
And yeah, they do. They blow through stop signs, and you almost hit them, and it's kind of scary.
Yeah, I'm busy.
Yeah. And I'm like, old lady bike, who stops? Okay?
All right, that was a great kind of overview. Now we're going to come back to Denver a little bit and talk about 2 citywide plans that, at least from community planning and development, are kind of the key policy documents that we have that shape the vision, policy, and regulation for our city. So the first one is Comp Plan 2000. This is the comprehensive plan for Denver. It really is about setting a vision for the future of Denver. And the fundamental question at the beginning of the document says is, what do we want the city to be and to become? And so over a year was spent engaging residents throughout the entire neighborhood, or throughout the entire city, to get their thoughts about the answer to that question. And the comprehensive plan, pretty much every community in America has a comprehensive plan. Certainly all of our neighbors, when you look at all of the suburbs that surround us, small rural communities in Colorado. It's very common practice, and in some states even required by law, to have a comp plan that sets the policy vision that you then evaluate your regulation against. So it's an important document. It is adopted by City Council. This one was adopted in 2000. Even though it's very important and adopted by Council, it is not actually regulation or law itself. It is a vision, it guides policy, and it guides future regulation, but there's not actually anything in the comp plan that you could tell somebody to do. And the comp plan sets 4 guiding principles, and these are very high level, kind of overarching goals or core values that shape everything else that's in the plan. And these were formed based on the input of Denver at the time that this plan was developed. So the first one is economic opportunity, and this is really about recognizing that in order for Denver to stay this great city that everybody loves, it needs to have a healthy economy, and that economic opportunity needs to be available for all of its citizens. Environmental stewardship, so a great recognition of the plan, and a lot of goals that fall under this category relating to efficiently using Denver's great natural resources. Equity, so just overall making sure that Denver citizens are equally able to engage in the economic health. And then finally, the fourth one is engagement. And so engagement was a core value during the planning process for comp plan because there was so much citizen engagement. And it talked about continuing that throughout any future planning efforts and generally just fostering that in the city. But it also is talking about Denver's role as engaging in the region. So being a partner and a collaborator with other communities because so much of who we are as a city is impacted overall by the region. So one thing I wanted to do quickly, comp plan has, I think it's around 20 goals that are very high level, and instead of kind of walking through what they are and how people got to them, we welcome you to read the document. We have a couple hard copies here tonight, and it's available on our website. So instead what we wanted to do is walk you through how a goal that's at this really high citywide level could actually translate to a tangible project or impact in your neighborhood. So start to understand the connection of what is the value of setting these larger citywide goals and how do they trickle down through our policy and regulation to actually impact change. So the goal we're going to do that example with is expand housing options for Denver's changing population. So this was one of the big goals in Comp Plan 2000. And where we're going to start narrowing down is now we're going to go from that citywide goal level into a neighborhood level and talk about Law Lincoln Park. Great neighborhood in Denver that had a community neighborhood plan done in 2009. They identified a strong desire in their neighborhood to see a little more diversity of the housing stock. And a lot of folks focused on a large site, I think it's like 14 acres, that the Denver Housing Authority owns called South Lincoln Park. And at the time that they were doing this plan, it was all low-income public housing, and there was a strong desire to keep all of those people in the neighborhood that want to be there and preserve that affordable housing, but also start adding a little more diversity. And so they identified that whole land that was owned by the Denver Housing Authority as an opportunity to see change and development. It also happens to be right next to the 10th and Osage Light Rail Station. So it's identified as a great opportunity to increase the wide range of housing options that you would ideally want, including affordable housing when you're right next to transit. And then DHA, the Denver Housing Authority, actually has a great approach to planning and community engagement themselves. So they did a more specific master plan specifically for this property and did their own community engagement, a great process, again involving a lot of the people who currently live there in the public housing, and developed a vision. It's multi-phased, partially so that they can keep some of the housing in place at all times as they're building different phases. So they developed that plan. And then the next slide, another piece that had to happen, and as we kind of move down that funnel that Evelyn was doing earlier, is getting into regulation. So we have this vision and these goals of what we want to accomplish. Well, what, at least from a community planning and development side, what can we do to help see these things come to action? And so adopting new zoning was a big piece here. And so you'll learn more in your third session about zoning and how it works and some of the ways that Denver has approached zoning, especially since adoption of our new code in 2010. So I won't get into all the reasons why, but adopting new zoning here and remapping it on this site where they wanted to see the new development was a key step to enable the kind of development they wanted to do. And so thanks to all of those steps, DHA is in the process now of actually building this new housing. And if you haven't been out there, I highly encourage you to check it out. It's, there were 182 public housing units on this site, and now there's 300 of those, so they greatly increased the amount of public housing, but they also added almost 150 market rate units. So there's great diversity. There's also a focus on the senior community, a lot of folks who wanted to age in this neighborhood and have housing that fit their needs a little better, seniors, and so they have some very specific senior-focused projects as well. And there's more to come. It's really a great place. They've integrated public art and community gardens. So definitely encourage you to go check it out. Next. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't see you. We're not seeing it. Yeah.
Does the housing authority retain ownership of all the land?
Yes, I think they have ownership of at least a fair amount of it.
Is city planning office involved with the neighborhood plan, helping the neighborhood come up with the plan?
Yes, and we'll be all about neighborhood plan, and we'll talk a little bit about how that works in the process that we engage in with neighborhoods. But yeah, we do actually kind of lead the process in partnership with the neighborhood.
The same thing as a neighborhood plan.
No, and so this might be a good one to, in terms of getting into more detail of what an overlay district is, to put on the list Evelyn was talking about, because it's a zoning tool. So it's definitely not a neighborhood plan. It's it's regulatory. So it's more taking the vision and implementing it through zoning. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Blueprint Denver. This plan came shortly after comp plan. It was adopted in 2002, and it focuses on citywide goals and policies that are specific to land use and transportation. So Laura touched on this a little bit about the important connection between those two things. For a long time in the planning and development world, it was pretty common to have kind of land use planning going on. People saying, oh, let's put in a new neighborhood over here, trying to do some new development over here, and then completely separately have transportation folks designing roads and the transportation network, and not always thinking about how those things might fit together. And if you go to the next slide, this is just an example of trying to illustrate how important the connection between land use and transportation is. So in this example, you have houses that are kind of spread out, and the idea is that you build a grocery store in this neighborhood. And depending on where the houses are and how far apart they are from each other and from the store, it kind of leads you to a certain network of transportation. Which go to the next slide. This is one example. You might have to build roads like this so that this land use pattern has now created a certain transportation demand. An alternative way of setting it up could be maybe you do it a little more compactly and strategically think about how you want your transportation to work. So instead, what you build is a little more efficient. There's less road, and depending on how you configure things and what you build, and the quality of that built environment will also impact the type of transportation that people want. So there's lots of studies showing that when people are in vibrant mixed-use areas, they're much more likely to walk or use their bike. And especially on the walking side, what you intuit from that is that it's a lot more interesting to walk around when there's activity and things to look at, instead of just kind of the same monotonous landscape or really wide arterial with cars zooming by. So the way we build our communities and the type of land use that you see in a neighborhood is intimately connected with the type of transportation that people want or will kind of automatically start generating based on that land use. And so Blueprint Denver was, at the time, like Laura said, this is over 12 years ago, was really setting the stage nationally for thinking about planning, especially at a citywide level, as linking those two things. So we went around the city, again, lots of public engagement, and created a very inclusive public process. We had a committee, a land use and transportation committee that did a lot of more regular input throughout the entire planning process, but we also went to every neighborhood in Denver and asked kind of the key question that we're dealing with now, which is Denver's going to grow. Where should that growth go, and how do we want to shape it so that we end up with the land use and transportation patterns that we want and that are sustainable? And a big concept that came out of that public engagement that we did was thinking about the city in terms of areas of stability and areas of change. So areas of change, one of the major goals of Blueprint Denver is to direct growth into areas of change. And through community input, the plan actually started to define where those areas are in Denver. And again, this was back in 2000. It was adopted in 2002. We started the planning process in 2000. So at that time, places like Lowry and Stapleton were key redevelopment opportunities where a lot of change was anticipated. You know, acres and acres of availability to bring new residents in and funnel growth. And then of course there's other areas like downtown that were more established but still have a lot of opportunity for new growth, and were recognized as places where we want to funnel to basically our stable neighborhoods. Oh yeah.
Just a quick question. As somebody who used to live in Stapleton and now lives downtown, I'm just looking at the slide in relation to the land use and transportation link. And a question for the parking lot, so to speak, no pun intended, is how does the city work with RTD? Because you can't really, I mean, getting around from Stapleton or Lowry by bus is really, really hard. So what's the interlinking relationships between city planning and then the regional transportation district? Could we put that on the list for later? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. And I'll touch on it a little bit in a minute. Yeah, it's a great question. So as opposed to areas of change, then we have areas of stability, which is really the majority of Denver's stable, established neighborhoods. And note that these are not called areas of no change. So it doesn't mean change isn't going to happen. And in most neighborhoods, some have even more of these areas than others. There are places where it makes sense to see some change, and you want reinvestment. You might even like to see a little bit of added density along certain streets. So it's not that change won't happen, but it's that it's going to happen in a way that protects the character of that existing area. Which is a little different than an area of change, which especially when you're talking about like a Stapleton back in 2000, you're kind of just creating a new character. So this was the map that got adopted, and we're going to do an activity later that involves using this map, so you'll be able to see a little more closely with it right in front of you where these red areas are, but anything that's in red was designated as an area of change. We also have we have a lot more hard copies of blueprints, so there's at least one at every table if you're interested in flipping through the entire document.
Can I just make one comment about this? So, right, so Sarah talked about this is Gateway, Stapleton, Lowry. The thing I think is interesting about this is that in 2000, we were just starting to think about our industrial areas, right? And historically, most cities across the United States use the river as the dumping ground. So all the industrial, likewise, if you have been here a long time, you remember Riverfront. Before it was Riverfront, it was just the rail yards. So it's interesting that they started thinking then, realizing that change was starting to happen. The industrial manufacturing was going out. That part of our economic development was part of the past. And they were starting to think about this becoming now part of the change and the opportunity for densification and growth in the city itself.
And then,
One question. Is that map that you showed up to date, or has it been revised since?
It's a great question. So if you don't mind, I'm going to wait because our activity is going to get into that a little bit. The short answer is it's semi-updated, but basically in the sense that as we do neighborhood planning, we'll reevaluate areas of change versus areas of stability and update the map a little bit. But it has not been updated in that comprehensive overview, like to realize that Stapleton, for example, is basically built out. So that's part of what we're going to do in our activities, talk a little more about that. So one of the things that we're actually going to start an update to Blueprint very soon. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. And one of the things we want to do when we update it is do a better job of establishing in the document as part of the planning process with the whole community, how do we want to measure whether what our recommendations are in the plan are working or not. It's not something that Blueprint really set up, and it's just been in the past few years that our department started saying, well, we set this goal of funneling growth into areas of change, so are we accomplishing that? And the metric that we've been using to start evaluating that is looking at permit valuation on a yearly basis and mapping where that permit activity is occurring in the city. And so you can see, starting in 2011, all the way up to this year, we always have, the ratio is for the amount of investment in the area of change versus stability. So the lowest ratio we had was 3 to 1. And this year we happen to really exceed it. So it's a good sign. We're very happy and pleased to see that generally we're seeing a lot more investment in the areas of change. But like I said, when we look to the future, we have to document when we're thinking about different ways of kind of capturing over time how the policies are working.
Oh yeah, a question. So often find in the areas of change, like if you're industrial downtown, there's less impact in the transitional zone, but I think probably what a lot of people here are experiencing in residential is that transition between an area of change, like an arterial road, say like 38th Avenue, and the people in the neighborhoods directly adjacent to it. And I know a lot of that is a zoning issue as well, but are you going to somehow have a metric for that, or also just view that by surveying the neighborhoods and their viewpoint? And I know this is all part of neighborhood planning and that too.
Well, yeah, but it will definitely factor into the updated. We don't know exactly what updates the scope or exactly how it's going to play out, but certainly something we talked about internally is one possibility we see is that the whole concept of area of change and area of stability might need to be refined a little so that maybe there's different types or categories to address, this might be an area of change, but it's a different kind of area of change because it happens to be right next to a stable residential area versus an area of change that's on a rail corridor that used to be industrial. So I think it's a great point, and I don't know that we know yet what the approach is going to be, but I think it's definitely going to be part of the update.
Oh, how did you come up with the target that people want to buy?
Yeah, it's a great question. Basically, we decided that we thought it was a good ratio to have approximately 4 times as much development in areas of change. And it's one of the reasons why when we do the new document, we want to be more clear and make it part of the process to kind of create goals and targets. So the 4 to 1 is really just based on, a good goal, looking at what some other cities have. It's about 4 times as much in an area of change versus an area of stability.
So just as a follow-up, when it jumped to 11 to 1 this year, that's a dramatic change. Is that something that maybe is under question about?
I think we haven't done a lot of analysis into it. I think part of what we're imagining is going on is just the amount of development and activity that's happening in Denver right now, especially downtown, which is all of downtown is an area of change, is just so high. So part of this is just overall the amount of activity. But again, it makes it feel better to know that even though there's been this huge jump in permitting activity, it is still largely happening in areas of change instead of areas of
Just start talking about when we were talking about Stapleton, for example. Stapleton, yeah, it was rapidly changed, but it's very predictable what's gone in there. The price point of those homes as they're being built, you could probably guess the economic or the earning power of the people who move in there, and you see that's a very predictable model. Something like my neighborhood, which is all single family, entirely single family except for one tower block that was built in the 50s. The price point changes from somewhere around $250 when people buy the home to 1.25 million when the property is redeveloped. And we see a lot of change dramatic in the need for services or what they expect for city services in a $1.2 billion home versus a $250,000 home. So we actually see a lot more change than maybe you're seeing in Stapleton, even though outwardly it looks like we have one little teeny corner that's on that map that's a part that's indicated as red, but it doesn't counter. We're not changing zoning laws at all, but we're dramatically changing the housing stock in our neighborhood. Right. I mean, is there something that will incorporate that?
And this starts getting into a little bit kind of the boundaries of the scope of Blueprint, because I think, first of all, it's a great point, and I think it's definitely something that needs to be discussed. But I would imagine when you're talking about a lot of the change services that are needed based on income changes like that, some of it does relate to land use and transportation. You know, obviously income a lot of times relates to the type of transportation that you're using. But it also relates to a lot of services that go well beyond the scope of land use and transportation. Development, environmental health, and public works for some of the, you know, there's...
We're going from usually 1 bathroom to now 4 or 5 bathrooms. So you're really talking just a sewer system. I mean, we're changing the amount of water use and I mean, those kinds of dynamics, things that we don't necessarily see.
Yeah.
You know, what I would say, I think all these questions are hinting at that there's much more complexity to the issue of this that was simplified in Blueprint Denver that made it very binary, right? It's either an area of change, area of stability. And really, at the time, Blueprint Denver was a national model, right? You see Envision Utah follow a very similar process a couple years after, and some others across the country. So, you know, you have to take it in context of what it did at the time. It was the first comp plan to really say there is a direct connection between land use and transportation. So I think it was a very good start. I think as we have aged, we now realize there's all these different layers that you were talking about, right? And in a certain extent, it's cheated, right? It said you've got Gateway. We're going to get all these new people. We know exactly we're going to put them in all these greenfields. We're going to put them in Gateway, right out by the airport. We're going to put them in Stapleton, 4,700 acres. We're going to put them in Lowry, 1,800 acres. All greenfield, no existing community, right? You just start dropping things in versus our neighborhoods where we live in that has all this layer, this patina of history and homes and economics and ethnicities. And so I think this next piece that the city of Denver will do, this next go at the comp plan will really start, I mean, you know, as part of a community conversation, we'll need to get into this complexity that you guys have, you know, just like we discovered, oh my God, there's more to it. Right.
Well, no one's complaining when a home goes in and pays more taxes to the city and gets people off the roads that would be commuting in from Adams Ranch. I mean, no one's. I mean, yeah, it's hard to tell somebody, I'm sorry, your house improved in value just because your neighbor's is now worth 5 times as much. So it's not an easy argument, but it does change our dynamic of how
the culture of place, right?
Yeah,
changes, and that is how we identify our neighborhood. Like that's how we identify with where we live. And anthropology, all those together. Yeah.
In the spirit of make the plan, work the plan's got to be dynamic, I would assume. Got to be some agility there. But when there's an 11-to-1 ratio of investment coming in from the private sector, how can the city control actually what occurs in the plan because it's driven by economics? So when we start talking about layering in affordable housing, and there's an 11-to-1 ratio versus a 4-to-1 as desired, the plan's static, but at the same time, it's hard for the city to control that growth and where that growth occurs and affordability of housing, etc.
So I would just say that 11-to-1 doesn't necessarily represent that it's all private investment, right? I would guess that somewhere in here, there's $300 million of federal loan from TIF from the federal government, from the Federal Rail Administration, and from the Federal Transportation Administration, or DUS. Right? Yeah, Union Station. So I think, so I don't think this is really talking about all private investment. I think there's a layering in here that's not part of that analysis. But to your point about how do you make it dynamic, it's a good question, because this is, I mean, blueprint, making a plan for 155 square miles of city with very different neighborhoods is, takes 2 years to do. So how often do you want to do it? And I think that kind of goes back to Evelyn's funnel of you do the comp plan and then you start narrowing down and trying to refine it with the neighborhood plans and then ultimately the zoning. But it's never a perfect planning process, right? In the perfect world, planners start up here and then they move here and then they move here. And I've never in 20 plus years actually been able to do that process. I'm usually somewhere in the middle, and right now the Gates plan, I'm working on a development plan, which is very specific. And the stationary plan is moving forward, and I can't get too far ahead of that. And so there's no, cities are messy and humans are messy, and so it's all mixed.
Okay. But plans are theories. What happens in application is the direct outcome of the capital investment that goes into these projects, correct? So we're talking about theory.
That's a policy. They set a policy.
Plans, and we try to work, and we try to stick to that plan as much as we can.
Right, and we 4-to-1. So the fact that we have 11-to-1, we're actually seeing, we're way exceeding that goal. So this isn't so much about saying how much growth do we want, how much permit activity, it's saying of the activity that is happening, where is it going? Is it going in the places that we wanted? And we do have a little control over that piece because we implement zoning. So since this plan was adopted, it was one of the main reasons that we redid our entire zoning code and remapped the city in 2010, was to start making the zoning match a little better where areas of change were and the types of change that we wanted to see. So there is, you're right, it's way too messy to be able to say we can take a plan and then know it's going to be perfectly implemented and we'll get all the outcomes we want, because so much of it depends on private sector. But we have the ability to create tools and regulation to shape it.
I think that's an excellent point, is the zoning is one arm of how we can control that growth. Right. And that development.
Exactly.
I think you hit it on the head. The zoning controls it.
Great, so we're almost done. This is a great segue, some stuff that's come up into what we're about to do, which is, I think, a lot of questions asked, especially about this nuance of it's not as simple as just area change and area stability is what we're going to be looking at. And what's exciting is that at the same time we're updating Blueprint Denver, there will be 3 other citywide plans going on as part of the same initiative that we're working in partnership with our other departments of the city on. So one is a transit master plan. So this gets a little to your question. One of the fundamental things that this plan wants to do is at least begin the conversation about, can we really achieve the vision that we have for Denver if we keep relying on RTD to provide the transit service? It's very challenging. It's a regional transportation district. Their goals are, and their service model is based on the region. It's not based on Denver and Denver neighborhoods specifically. And so it's also very much based on getting people kind of in and out of downtown and that regional type of movement. And obviously if you look at what's in Comp Plan and Blueprint Denver from over a decade ago, the vision of our vibrant city entails a little bit more than that in terms of really high quality transit. So Fast Tracks is awesome. What RTD is doing it's obviously great. When you think about connecting all of your neighborhoods to each other, there's a whole other level. And that's what this plan is going to start talking about. And it'll be very connected to Blueprint Denver because that transit network has to relate to where we want to see more growth, for example. And then we'll also be having, you might already be familiar with Denver Moves bicycles. And we're going to take it to the next step now. It's always intended to also include pedestrians. So this will be looking at pedestrians and the trail network across the whole city. And then our colleagues in Parks and Rec are going to be updating the citywide parks plan, which is called Game Plan. So we are working right now on a way to roll this out to the community that is the most successful possible, both from like a branding standpoint so that people understand this is all happening together in a coordinated way, but also from a respect of your time. We don't want to have a community meeting about Blueprint in your neighborhood on Tuesday and then a community meeting on Thursday about Game Plan. So we're in the process right now of kind of figuring out how this is all really going to work together to be kicked off early next year. And if you go to the next slide, I think I saw most of you put yes, which is great, on the sign-in sheet in the column that says, do you want the CPDE newsletter? If you sign up for that newsletter, you'll be one of the first groups to get a blast once we have this launch, have a website up to advertise, how meetings are going to happen and where and how to get involved. So stay tuned through that newsletter. That's all we have. So
There was a couple questions. You had a question, sir?
I just wanted to, it seems like various people have touched on something that concerns me, which is that we have a large number of institutional actors. Your planning, sort of city planning seems to be talking about seems to concern physical infrastructure, buildings and streets and transit lines. Of course, we also have institutional infrastructure, which is extremely important, for instance, the public education system. In some sense, we had thought that the building decisions, major building decisions in our neighborhood ought always to be considered with regard to their potential impact on the local schools. And I'm concerned that the city, DPS, DHA, Public Works, Denver Water, CDOT, which is making a rather big city planning decision for the northeast part of Denver, all by itself, and RTD, are very differently accountable or not accountable, and I'm not sure that they are speaking to each other and working together very well together. I just wanted to raise that issue. I think various others have touched on that idea. So that in some sense, the project you're planning is insufficiently broad, although it seems very far.
yeah, and I think it's a great point. I'm not going to try and pretend like all of those groups are perfectly in sync with each other and on the same page. But I think every year we're making progress. It's something we hear from all of our neighborhoods, something we certainly agree with, the importance of making these connections. So the fact that we're doing a transit plan and RTD is going to be a partner and at the table as part of that is a huge step forward. What's been going on with CDOT, we actually have been very involved with them in the planning and what that will mean for the neighborhoods along that corridor. So I'm not going to say there's not continued work to do, but I think we're making a great progress in forming those relationships and making it become more common practice for everybody to be at the table together. But it's a great point.
Regarding the transit master plan, will that take existing corridor plans into consideration, or will it just kind of override them to say like federal or?
Oh, sure. So yeah, we have a few that have already happened, and a few that are going to be active at the time of this. I think ideally they'll be working together. So most of those corridor plans are streets that have already been identified as key transit corridors, and it's probably unlikely that would change. So I think they'll be working in sync.
Well, I'm thinking in case we came to an agreement of how they want the transit, and then if there's a master plan, will that? Yeah.
So the master plan is going to stay what we call mode neutral, and so it will identify enhanced corridors where we definitely want to see. I think what they're establishing is kind of like a minimum level would be enhanced bus service, but it could go all the way up to all different kinds of rail. But it won't so much be saying this is kind of the design or the specific mode that we envision. It's more just establishing the corridors, and then you use corridor studies to refine it. So those corridor studies will be almost a little ahead of the planning.
And can you explain why you want to stay mode neutral at this point?
Sure. Yeah, a big reason is that we see, a lot of times we see the opportunity for the transit mode to evolve over time. So sometimes based on funding or what is available on that street today in terms of density to support transit, one mode might make sense in the shorter term. It wouldn't preclude doing a more heavy investment in rail in the future. But we don't want to say this one definitely has to be rail and then miss the opportunity to do something like bus rapid transit in the shorter term.
It's also linked to federal funding. So if you step ahead, if you get ahead of the federal process, evaluation process, and name your mode before you go through a proper federal review, like EIS and evaluation analysis, then you begin tipping your hat to the federal government who you're looking for funds before, which they don't like. They want it to be a very very specific process.
Right, exactly.
So it's not trying to ditch it's not trying to dodge the question. It's trying to make sure you line it up for the best possible funding, federal funding. You know, if you have the ability to go for federal funding, that you're lined up for it in the best possible way.
And that's why we do the corridor studies.
Yes.
It's because then you can get into the detail and look much more specifically at what mode makes sense.
Are the plans, are there any relationship how it's going to impact our regional cities like Aurora, Lakewood? I mean, is there any consideration of how these plans are going to, because it's, you know, if you look at housing, that's a regional problem, affordable workforce housing. So how's this all going to, is there any collaboration with regional cities and governments?
It's a great question. We're still figuring out exactly who all the parties are that we need to kind of officially involve in the planning process. The transit plan in particular has already had neighboring jurisdictions come to them, even though we're still figuring this stuff out, saying, hey, we want to be involved because they understand that if Denver does something along a major corridor to improve that transit, what happens when it gets to the border with them, right? So that's one key example. But yes, it very much impacts all of the things that are on this list, from trails and pedestrian networks to the bigger land use and transportation networks and blueprint. So we have some great models. We have a regional planning group that's called the Denver Regional Council of Governments, for Dr. Hogg, that already has a great model set up for bringing, they do like a planner's idea exchange, and bring planners from throughout the whole region together to talk about these issues. So the good news is we have some models to collaborate with the neighboring jurisdictions.
So we're over in time, and there's maybe a couple people who are sleeping a little bit. So, which is fine, because you've been listening for a long time, so I can appreciate that. So we can take one more question, and then I think it would be healthy for everybody to take a break and not listen to us. Yeah, so we'll take one more question, or do you guys just want a break? That's cool too. Take a break. Okay, let's take a break.
We'll have time at the end of the night for a little more Q&A.
So, but you have to be back here at 7:45? No, you got to be back.
Collaboration partner.
We're actually walking through what you probably already know, which is Denver is growing like crazy, and it's projected to continue to do that. So this shows by 2030, so in 15 years, we should have about 100,000 more people. It may be, yeah, and people certainly did not anticipate the growth that we most recently had. Between 2010 and 2013, we gained 50,000 people in Denver, which was more than we gained for the entire 2000s, and that was not anticipated. So obviously there's a nuance to doing population projections, but regardless of the amount, we know it's probably going to be a lot. And then we also know that part of what's driving that growth is that Denver is a very popular destination for millennials. And so from 2000 to 2010, we actually were the top city for folks of that age moving to our city. And then also interesting to note is just generally in Colorado, as in most of the country, where we have population that's growing and is growing in urban areas. So in 1950, a little over 60% of the state lived in urban areas, and in 2010, over 85% did. So we're growing, we're also densifying.
Are there any numbers that show like that the suburban areas are beginning to lessen, or are they also increasing?
Most of them are increasing as well. So the question we're going to do in this very short activity, so this is just kind of a teaser of what we're going to have to do with the Blueprint Denver update in an extended, months and months long process. We'll do a very quick version tonight of answering this fundamental question: if we're going to get at least 100,000 new residents in the next 15 years, where are they gonna go? And partly why this is relevant, sorry I keep walking around, I'll just stay over here, is the fact that Laura was pointing out earlier, we have some huge areas of change in terms of geographic area, hundreds and thousands of acres that are basically built out now. So we don't have the advantage anymore of depending on these areas to take a lot of new residents. And the question came up earlier, actually I have a printout, if people want to see it, feel free after the activity, I can show it to you, of some of the small updates we've done, like for example in Cherry Creek, the entire residential neighborhood that's north of the shopping area was an area of change in 2000. And that's one of the places we've done an updated neighborhood plan since this plan was adopted. And we recognize that in the time that happened between Blueprint and their neighborhood plan, that neighborhood basically, a lot of new housing went in, there's a lot of change in investment, and then it stabilized. And so it's now been taken out as an area of change. So we've done some small refinements like that, but basically the map is as you see it.
So are you just saying that the residential only, not the rest of it is?
Right, so all this red that you still see here is
that's part of your 11.
The mall and the mixed use kind of shopping district. It was more just the residential neighborhood, like when you get north of 3rd Avenue, that was taken out again. So you're actually, yeah.
So there's neighborhoods, for example, Montbello, that has changed. It doesn't even really have an identity anymore, but it needs modernization. Is that part of the plan?
Yeah. So this is a good point. It gets to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, which is when you say change, it can mean a lot of things, right? And so what we're really asking you guys to focus on right now is kind of where should the growth really be funneled? So new people living and new jobs created. But that's really the question for tonight. When we update Blueprint and really get into this neighborhood by neighborhood, we will also have to address those kind of questions. There might be a kind of change that it's not, we're not saying we're going to change the character of Montbello, it's a pretty established residential area, but there might be other kinds of change that we're looking for. So I think tonight really the focus is on trying to identify where we could really accommodate new growth and density. And thinking about, could it be identifying more corridors that have the ability to handle more density, for example, and are adjacent to neighborhoods, but not in the heart of the neighborhood. So as you think about this, yeah.
So I'm thinking, it's so funny that I live in Five Points, but now I have all these questions related to Stapleton. So like going to be full of rental, and then 2008 happened, and Stapleton is not as mixed density as was originally promised. So even as we go through this exercise, there's this awareness that there's things that are sort of out of planners' control, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's horrible. You can't control everything. We try every day. But there's this thing called the market.
And people, and they're messy.
Yes.
And that car sewer called for that, just stick to the plan.
Right.
So just really quickly, some things to think about, these kind of big picture goals that influence how we decide where growth should happen is economic development, making sure that we're thinking about maintaining, because even though we're getting all this growth, it can be kind of scary, it's the sign of having a very healthy economy. Transportation, how can we link where growth is happening to where we already know or hope that future transportation investments will happen? Affordable housing. So this is, again, there's only so much we can control on this topic, but thinking about, are there places where we're more likely to see opportunities for affordable housing by allowing growth and density to occur? Next slide. Density just said that, where are sites, even if some of them are sites within an existing neighborhood, where it might be appropriate to raise density a little bit to accommodate some of this growth. And then just overall sustainability, obviously the goal of thinking about this and planning ahead for where we want to guide growth, even though we can't control it, is so that we have a sustainable future for Denver. And so really quickly, the instructions. Each of you has the current map in front, or the old map, because it's from when the plan was adopted long ago. And basically we're asking you should all have some post-it notes, some of mine got covered up, and pens and markers. And we're just asking your group to talk about, knowing so many of these red areas are not in play anymore, what kind of changes would you propose? Where do you think we can start adding some area change to accommodate this growth? Make sure you have somebody in your group who can take notes and be ready to report back, because we'll do a very quick report back from each table to the group. Yeah.
Are we making a leap of faith that if we're saying density should go such and such a place, are we making a leap of faith that the transportation options will happen even though they don't exist now?
Okay.
Is that what we're doing?
Tonight, yes, because we're limited. You have 15 minutes to do this. When we do blueprint, no, that's the whole point, is connecting them. And I think what you can do tonight to make that clear is say this could be an area of change, but only if there's a significant transit investment that goes with it. Because you can make that clear as part of your recommendation.
Yeah, and the only other thing I'll say is that remember that when this map was made, it was before fast tracks had passed, before we voted on $4.7 billion to tax ourselves. So if you think about, we have a whole new paradigm about how we think about transportation in our city than this map should. It is not reflected on the map.
So you have 15 minutes, we've got until 8:10.
How are you? All right, I need that sort
It's already there. Increased
Walking table to table to give you a personalized 5-minute warning. I'm just giving you all a collective 5-minute warning. We'll be jumping back into the discussion inside. So we'll wrap it up.
What is available is already specced out. We can't even talk about adding additional capacity there beyond what's
Yeah, it was it's like, it's really hard to make it so
There's a lot of state on 8:30, but that means we all have to schedule here at 8:30 on the dot. So out of respect for that, I want to give Sarah and Laura a chance to wrap this activity up. I'm so excited that y'all are in the middle of these great conversations. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is just sort of a taste. It's a teaser for the larger blueprint effort that's coming up down the West Fall.
Great. Yeah, there will be lots of opportunities starting next year for you to spend an entire evening doing just this in a lot more detail. So quickly, we're just going to give each table, if you want to pick your person to report out, to just maybe talk quickly, whatever you want to hit on. You know, you could just talk about what some of your challenges were, or if you actually want to show us your map and some of the recommendations you had.
Cool. All right, table one. We looked at growth.
Can we make sure we listen to everybody?
So we looked at the growth, the future of the city along the transportation corridors, particularly the light rail, commuter rail that's going north of downtown through Glowville, El Raya, and Swansea neighborhood. But the one thing that we discussed is we don't want to have huge displacement. And that's the problem with a lot of these neighborhoods. So we'd like to still see those single-family homes still there. Any kind of high-density projects that would be built have to have an adequate number of appropriate housing that is affordable. so you don't displace an entire community. The other corridors we looked at is Colfax. There's several areas. It's a great transportation corridor. It's a straight shot to downtown. Just going to the east, it will actually connect in Aurora at 225 to the new light rail as well next year. The Broadway corridor, which is already starting to develop quite a bit because of Gates, but there's still some room left. And then finally, Smith Road. You know, really it's almost like the service road of I-70. Lots of warehouses, mostly marijuana warehouses. There's a lot of real estate there that could be developed in high density areas as well. That's all we got.
Great job.
You're next. I'll move this right along.
No, thanks for Well, first off, we mostly just talked about the idea that infrastructure development and density needs infrastructure improvements, and oftentimes developers are given a new plot of land to work with, and they need to do a better job to work really phasing that into the existing surroundings of the neighborhood, and also anticipating the additional costs of safety, transportation, and pedestrian concerns around larger or new density projects. When actually pointed to the map, first we looked at the VA and Rose Hospital area that's redeveloping. That's just an obvious open space that is obvious for redevelopment. I point out to Lowry, I think that's kind of under dense, or should handle a lot more density there. Glendale, even though it's not in Denver, I think is certainly right in the center of Denver, and an area that is could easily handle, already is handling density and affordable housing, and has opportunity for more. And then we started to look at just a lot of the existing areas that you've already marked as areas of change that, such as Valerius, we're in Sunnyside and down to Jefferson Park, and those are areas that are already accepting density, and but I think that needs to be done cautiously at a good pace that works with existing neighborhoods.
Great. Sounds good, and you're also going to chime in, aren't you?
Well, we had a lot of fun and a lot of laughter, and we came up with some good ideas and some preposterous ideas. Of course, we talked a lot about transit-oriented development with the light rail and the 8 train going out that way. And let's see, you were going to say something about.
Yeah, we're also going to use eminent domain to tear down all the seedy motels on East Colfax and West Colfax. We're going to build high-density, mixed-income properties along that transit corridor.
Bring us your money.
We ignored the fact that Gateway was developed and decided that it could use a little more development. And I think we should go back to Stapleton's Green Book and maybe tear down some of the larger homes and build the mixed income that was promised. And then some people had their eye on Mont Bello, so we put something there. A little bit down by Hampton Kennedy Golf Course. I think we got it.
And lastly, we're going to give the owners of the Lakeside Amusement Park an offer that they can't refuse. We're going to scrape that land and we're going to build a bunch of We're in high density, multi-family property in South
Lakeside, really?
Great.
Well, I want that. I love that. All right. We made a couple pitches here. I think it sounds like our plan is very similar there. Gateway certainly has a lot of opportunity, and you have a lot of possibility for the people who are going to be working in the new airport city, the envisioned airport city. As a former air traffic controller, I never wanted traffic on Pena, but now that I don't work there, that's fine. But it's obvious because it's connected to light rail. We had a couple other ideas. because I am in southeast Denver and we thought about the area around Hamden, it already has the transportation built in. When you go south, if you ever see that 9 Mile, everyone goes, where is 9 Mile? Well, it's right here, Parker Road and Hamden. And the adjacent areas of Denver already have a lot of area that is dense, a lot of high-rise developments around there. We also have a whole bunch of services that are coming in, things that maybe people would use, a new Super Target, there's a Whole Foods, there's a Walmart, large shopping centers that people drive to currently, but would be easily within walking from the light rail station there. So it'd be a good place to put, it's not the most glamorous part of Denver, but it's also a place that if you can afford that and then can get downtown without having to get into a car, it's a good incentive to develop it. We talked about Southwest Denver, and in the Harvey Park neighborhood, South Harvey Park, their Metro State just built or just purchased the campus of Loretto Heights. And they're going to be doing an out campus, so if you could encourage a place that would have connectivity of two types, it's where you're going to have a lot of students commuting to it, but also have connecting to the main campus. And so you'd have a connection from downtown to Southwest Denver, both of which would be serving a population that, you know, a Metro State student, the typical student, and maybe lower economic students who are starting at the regional campus, because that's what they can afford and that's where they're closest to. So it's a good encouragement and be a good place to have modest homes or modest housing at a modest price, I should say. We talked about Morrison Road, which is that little thin red line out here. I was told it has a ton of tire shops currently on it, and that's about all. Economic development to encourage diversity and maybe bring in younger people who are being pushed out of the neighborhoods like Highlands. It's just too expensive, it's maybe too hip. But it'd be a new place to develop a new part of Denver, a new neighborhood of Denver, kind of like what Seattle does, where you go 3 blocks and you're in an entirely different neighborhood, new chemistry. And then our last thought was, we talked about the Parisian model, that in Denver, all of the new housing in Denver tends to stop at about 6 stories. It's usually somewhat unattractive, somewhat bland. In downtown, maybe change or look at the zoning laws to increase some superstructures, some high-rises that take up a smaller footprint but offer a lot more, and then let them go at the cost that they go at. I mean, the people who really want to live in Denver have the means to and want to live downtown, offer something for them that is in a high-rise structure. So, did I get all of them? I think I got it. Great.
Are we keeping Lakeside?
Oh yeah, we annexed Lakeside and kept it. Turned it into a park.
I'm going to say something first. Listening to all this, it just comes back to the fact that none of us want it next to where we live. We don't want density next to where we live. And ours would have been different if we had known that we could entirely change the face of the city as it exists now. So you all have one up with taking away Lakeside, et cetera. I wish we could have done that. We couldn't, so we're more practical.
Yeah, we just looked at some of the major areas and predominantly to the north because that's where 3 of us live. We have 1 to the south, but again, Mount Bello I think was brought up by a couple of people, and it has lacked some investment, and I think there's areas along Fiore and some of the major arterials in Mount Bello that could eat some of this mixed-use development with some both market rate and probably affordable housing. There's the area Colorado and 40th that is currently, a lot of it's being developed, but I think there's more opportunity up there, especially with the rail station, the line going in. As far as you guys brought up height and bringing up more height, yeah, I think there's a lot of region around downtown and also in the Rhino district where we could do exactly what you're talking about. Instead of building 4 stories of stick frame over podium, let's have a minimum height zoning standard for developers instead of just a maximum. And so it forces them to then build to a certain height, and it'll put more units on smaller footprints. When we're talking about 100,000 people, it's a lot of people to bring into a, what do you say it was? 120 square miles?
155.
155. A couple other areas that we looked at is Leedsdale. The section from basically Glendale out to Aurora there. There's probably opportunity along Colorado Boulevard, above the hospital that's gone down right now, and probably a little bit north and some south, which is already listed as an area change, but there could definitely be a drive to move people down there. We also pointed out Morrison Road. I think that's a really great opportunity, and it's really missed, and the more we can drive people out that direction, the views out there are phenomenal. If you ever drive back in Morrison Road, it's actually a really cool area. And then the other one just north of that, I think, is using the opportunity to Lakewood Gulch to maybe increase some more density, the walkability and the rideability, bikeability from Lakewood Gulch into downtown. The neighborhood to the north between the Gulch and Colfax is already starting to move, but the neighborhood to the south, there's very, very little investment going on right now. The housing stock there is pretty run down. So it's a really great opportunity to upzone that and get some more density and use that infrastructure that's already in place. Just can't talk into it.
Perfect. So again, really exciting to see sort of the level of conversation happening and the thoughtful sort of conversations happening at each table, and some of the sort of out of the box thinking, some of the creativity, which is not a bad thing when you're at this high level of that funnel and doing the visioning part. So we promised that we would talk to you a little bit about how to get involved. You've heard a lot of plugs already this evening for these upcoming citywide planning efforts. So the timing of our first annual Citizens Planning Academy couldn't have been better. We're priming the pump here for some great Academy participants and graduates to then move forward and be a part of those larger citywide planning efforts that are about to kick off within the relative short-term future. So if you have checked yes on the sign-in sheet, yes, if you haven't already checked in on the sign-in sheet, do that before you leave. If you've checked yes to get the CPD newsletter, you are automatically signed up to get those notifications of when those public meetings start happening. So we'll have a lot of activities like this. We'll give you more than 15 minutes to gather your thoughts. And with that, we're at the 8:30 mark. I've left at your tables I've left enough surveys for each person at your table to fill out the survey. Honestly, it's 3 questions, or 4 if you include your name, but that one should be an easy one. So any feedback that you have for us is great. If you prefer a digital survey, I'll be sending out a link to the online survey as well tomorrow. And then at around, let's see, what time did we start? 6 this afternoon, 6 this evening. At around 5:45, we had our very first participant walk through the door, and so I promised a door prize. That's Scott. Scott, everybody give Scott a hand. You are not only the first class of the CPA, you are the very first student of CPA, so that's your very own copy. Everybody else, you have to go to denvergov.org/blueprint to look at your own copy. Scott will have memorized that by the next session, so anybody have any questions, check in with him. So that's it for this evening. Thank you so much for spending the last 2.5 hours with us. Fill out your surveys, please.
Evelyn,
Drop them.
I just want to.
Oh, and we have another VIP in the house. I want to say thank you to the librarian. This is Mrs. Terry Nelson.
Hi and bye.
And she's not playing. So finish your survey. Let's wrap this up. We got to get out. Thanks so much.